Section 3.8 Gaddis, we are going to deal with characters and strings. A char holds a single character and a string holds a sequence. You can display both using a cout and a stream insertion operator. When you read in a string object, so far we've just been reading in numeric data, but when you read in a string object, we have some special input commands that we like to use. So you can cin str and it reads in a string that doesn't have blanks, but many times you want to read in a sentence, or you want to read in somebody's response, or you want to read in a whole textbook, and it's going to include blanks. If you want to read in something that has no blanks, or excuse me, that does have blanks, you need to read in the get line. And then you have to use this cin, str, and what will happen is the computer will input it and it will assign it to that str variable. When you read in a single character, you can just read in cin ch. Ch is our variable that holds a character, and that's as long as it's a non-blank character. Or you can use cin.get. That reads in any character also. You can assign the character to cin.get, and you can also cin.ignore, which skips over the next character in the input buffer. And sometimes we use cin.ignore to skip over things. We'll maybe show an example with the sample programs. Sometimes I've showed you how to use the cin.get to hold the screen open instead of using system pause. That's also another use for that, because you're just waiting. You're waiting for a keyboard input or a character to be read in. When you work with strings, you assign values to strings using the assignment operator, and so I identify a word as a string. So I assign, this would be a declaration. I declare words to be a string, and then I can assign words any string. I can use a plus to concatenate strings within an assignment operator. Okay, this would be similar for those of you that are used to Java. This would be similar to adding together or concatenating your output in Java. In C++, you can concatenate strings using the plus operator, but you cannot use that in a cout statement. You can also concatenate using plus equals, which would be our shortcut for writing words, it equals words plus food. So plus equals, you can use that operator to concatenate strings as well. You have several string member functions, which are, if you go and look at the C++ library, then you're going to find several string member functions. One is called length, which is kind of nice because if I need to count how long a word is, I can just use the variable name dot length with parentheses. I need parentheses here because it's calling a method, and it's going to tell me, well, that's 17 characters long, instead of me counting them all one by one. Assign will put repeated characters in a string. This is kind of nice for, like, remember on the table of data where we had the dash 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 at the top? You could actually assign however many characters you need in your table to format that separator, and then you tell it what character. So the assign button will assign, in this case it will assign equals a 80 equal signs. And then if you output it, it will output all of those end to end. This example is going to show that you're reading in a string without any special string commands. You're just going to use the cin command. We're supposed to input our name, so we're going to say Fred Flintstone. Fred space Flintstone. Press enter. And it does not do what we think it will do, because I needed to enter my city yet, but as soon as I hit that space, it automatically thought that was the end of the data, and then it used the next piece of data. Flintstone would be stored on what we would call a buffer, and it just pulled in that next piece of data into the buffer on Flintstone. So rather than using just the regular cin statement, we use those special commands. This is the same program, except now it is using the get line. So it's going to get line cin, and so whatever it inputs in this input stream with cin is going to assign to the variable not line. So I could do Fred Flintstone, and I forget where Fred Flintstone lives. So I don't have any idea. He lives near the quarry city. I forget what it is. Okay, so Oh, that's interesting because it took I went forward and I deleted and I went back. So it took all of the data that I was typing in when it used a get line. So that's a word of warning that it's going to do that. Okay. So we could say that we have Bob Jones and they live in Ankeny, and it will print out Bob Jones and Ankeny. That's using get line. So it gets the entire line. I'm kind of curious about that, capturing that data. So Bob Jones, hit enter. If I type in some stuff and I backspace it and I do more stuff, what does it do? It captures all of that. So that happens to be on this online compiler. I don't know if it would do that in the Visual Studio compiler. All right, so that's the example using getLine. Please note that you need to use #include IOStream, and you need to #include string to work with string objects. That's something I didn't mention. This program 324 in your source code file is going to show how you can use basically a pause command. Please note they're doing #include IOStream and then using namespace standard. And so the program has paused, pressed enter to continue. So you could use something like this instead of the system pause. If I press enter, it has paused a second time. Again, please press enter. And so now it's taking the cn.get and assigning it to the character. So this is another way that you could basically do the same thing, I believe. And it has paused for a third time. Please press enter again, and then it's doing cn.get. So you can store that input character to a value if you want by assigning it, or you can just use cn.get in order to pause the screen. This is the next program example in our source code file, and it's using the get line in order to get first name and last name. It concatenates the strings using a plus operator, and then it uses that assign value. So let's see what this does. If we say our first name is Fred and our last name is Flintstone, and then it's going to print Fred Flintstone, and it uses the assign statement to do these operators. Now, what's interesting is we don't have to tell it. Let's go ahead and run this again, and let's input somebody with a very short name, Sam Short. Now, and actually if we do all first name, for example, right here, and then I do short for a last name, if I don't tell it, otherwise, like that this was just the first name, because it's using get line, it'll read in everything. But notice that it's adjusting that output to whatever input I use. So if I do Sally May, I have no idea. It adjusts, okay? So if I go back, how does it do that? And it's using that dot length. So this particular program, which is 3-25, is showing you basically all of those string functions in one program that you guys could use. It's get line, concatenation is using the length character. So it takes the full name, puts it together, it gets the length, and then that's how many stars it assigns to a string. And so then when it prints stars, so when it prints stars down here, notice up here you had to declare a variable stars, and then down here it's going to output stars because stars was got assigned. So it's assigning however many asterisks to stars right here. And so that's basically doing a special type of an assignment statement. So then when we execute that and we print our names, we'll print Barney Rubble, it's going to print exactly the same number of asterisks as the length of our name.